Legislation Committee. We will call to order the Water Policy and Legislation Committee and special meeting of the Board of Directors for West Basin Municipal Water District for May 15th. It's now 10:02. We call the meeting to order. Do we have a quorum?
Madam Chair, I'll read the roll call. Chairwoman Gray
Here.
and Member Director Don Deere. Here. Both members of the committee are here.
Thank you very much. Item 3, public comment. Do we have anyone from the public who wish to comment?
Madam Chair, we have not received any requests for public comment for this meeting today. I do recognize that some people might be with us online. If there are any members of the public who would like to make public comment, please indicate so by raising your electronic hand. Madam Chair, I do not see anybody wanting to make a public comment.
Thank you very much. Item 4, presentations. Do we have any presentations?
There's no presentations today.
All right, item 5, action items. Would you please introduce those items?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have 4 action items before you today. The first item is 5A, Senate Bill 23 by Senator Caballero. This is related to the water supply and flood risk reduction projects expedited permitting. And for this presentation, we do have Matt Bay, our Senior Water Policy and Resources Analyst.
Thank you, EJ, and good morning, Chairwoman Gray and Director Deere. I'm now on page 3 of the agenda packet. And as EJ mentioned, we'll be taking a number of bills to you today for your consideration of a position. The first one before you here is Senate Bill 23. This is legislation that was introduced by Senator Ana Caballero, who represents parts of the San Joaquin Valley. The bill is sponsored by Aqua, and it's one of the association's highest priority bills for this session. It's intended to streamline the permitting process for water supply and flood risk reduction projects in California. It would require the State Water Board to use an approved habitat or natural communities conservation plan as a watershed plan for aquatic resources, unless a permitting authority determines that the plan does not meet that definition. It would also require the Department of Fish and Wildlife to issue final actions on certain water quality certifications within specific timelines. So essentially, the purpose of the bill is to mitigate delays in the permitting process that are caused by either overlapping jurisdictions of state and federal agencies, confusion that can occur about what constitutes a complete permit application, and then in general, overall staffing issues that lengthen and delay the decision-making and approval processes. The streamlining of permitting processes has been declared a priority for the state, according to Governor Newsom's recently released statewide water supply strategy. This strategy asks the legislature to streamline processes so that projects can be built more quickly while continuing to protect the environment. With a more streamlined process, water suppliers such as West Basin, Metropolitan Water District, and others will conceivably be able to plan, permit, and build water supply projects on an accelerated schedule. According to the author, the bill will help fast-track recycled water, desalination, and stormwater capture projects so that all regions in California have access to drought-proof, sustainable supplies of high-quality water. As Metropolitan moves forward with its Pure Water Southern California project, Los Angeles considers its Hyperion 2035 and Operation Next programs, and West Basin evaluates opportunities to build infrastructure that would allow it to connect to regional major recycled water projects. This bill could benefit these efforts by certifying any required permits more efficiently, improving project timelines, and streamlining planning activities. The bill was previously passed by the Senate Natural Resources and Water Committee, as well as the Senate Environmental Quality Committee. It's currently referred to Senate Appropriations and is actually set to be heard today in committee. It's opposed by a number of environmental groups. However, it's supported by a broad coalition of water agencies, municipal organizations, ag interests, and special districts, including Aqua, the Water Replenishment District, CMUA, and the California Special Districts Association. In its support letter, a coalition of water agencies wrote that California faces a range of water management challenges, including drought, floods, and other unpredictable weather patterns that have intensified in nature. The letter goes on to say there's a clear need to build and maintain water infrastructure that addresses these challenges, but the current processes in place are complex, lengthy, costly, and often serve as a barrier to progress in expanding and improving our water supply systems. SB 23 will address some of these issues, allowing California to get projects in place more quickly that promote reliable and resilient supplies. To support these efforts, staff is asking this committee to recommend the full board adopt a support position on SB 23. That concludes my report on this bill. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Matt.
Question.
Director Deere, any questions?
I have a question. Gloria, I have a question.
Yes,
Uh,
please.
Yeah. Why are the environmentalist groups opposed to it?
So in general, this bill would kind of accelerate some of the timelines and decisions that have to be made when agencies apply for a permit. And so anytime you have any kind of accelerated schedule like that, environmental groups tend to come out against that as a way of, possibly impacting or leaving out some of the details or the issues that they would like to see as part of the permitting process. So to them, having accelerated schedule is something that just in general, they're usually against.
Thank you. Thank you. Great.
Question,
Um,
Chair?
Director Williams has a question.
Oh, Director
Gloria's the
Williams.
chair.
Hello, is Director
I'm here.
Williams there?
Yes.
Great. Director Williams.
A quick question is, what is the estimated time that of the first project coming out of this will be online?
Well, this would impact any project that kind of goes forward in the state potentially. So, but I think the big one that we're looking at is Pure Water, Southern California, the metropolitan hopes to get online by 2028. So that would be the big one that we're looking at.
Okay, by 2028. What is being done to alleviate or get rid of the, we know that infrastructure projects like these are usually take longer to complete than originally estimated and cost way more. So what's being done to make sure that, well, not make sure, but to improve our chances of getting these projects online in a quicker manner, because usually they don't get done in any manner.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interaction and good relationships between water agencies and the state water board, who kind of look at their processes that they have in place. And, I think there's a general understanding of where kind of the bottlenecks are in terms of the process. And so that's something that water agencies want to see improve as these big projects come online. And while they're not there yet, I think this legislation would be a good step in the right direction for kind of identifying what those issues are and then putting new processes in place that allow them to accelerate some of the schedules of these big infrastructure projects. So there is an ongoing, discussion between Metropolitan and the state, but this would kind of memorialize that through legislation to allow that to happen.
Thank you.
So we move it on to the board.
All right, any other questions? You do support it, Director Deere, moving on?
Yes.
All right, then no other questions, we'll move it to the board with a recommendation, staff recommendation. All right, the next item, please.
Yes, Madam Chair. Next item that we have is 5B. It's Senate Bill 366 by, again, Senator Caballero. This is the California Water Plan Long-Term Supply Targets. And again, for this presentation, we have Matt Vay.
Thank you, EJ. So let's move forward to page 20 of the agenda packet. And the next bill before you is Senate Bill 366, which is also authored by Senator Ana Caballero. The bill is sponsored by the California Municipal Utilities Association. And what it would do is it would require DWR, the State Water Board, the California Water Commission, and other state and federal agencies, along with an updated advisory committee, to develop a comprehensive plan known as the California Water Plan to address the state's water needs and to meet the water supply targets that would be established by the bill. SB 366 would require the plan to be updated by December 31st, 2028, and to be updated every 5 years thereafter. Notably, it would set a water supply planning target of 10 million acre feet by 2040, including new and expanded supplies from a list of specific strategies, including recycled water, groundwater recharge, desalination, conjunctive use, stormwater capture, and improved regional and statewide conveyance. The bill had originally included a subsequent target of 15 million acre feet of supplies by 2050. However, that was removed in the most recent amendment of the bill. Other recent amendments would also add a focus to incorporate demand management activities into future versions of the California Water Plan that could be implemented to help meet the targets. One example of this mentioned in the analysis of the bill would be alternative water pricing. The initial version of the bill had also required the development of a long-term financing plan to support meeting the water supply targets in the bill. However, those were amended out of the legislation recently. The updated stakeholder advisory committee noted in the bill would include representatives from urban and ag water suppliers, local government, business, production agriculture, tribes, environmental groups, and other interested parties. The author of the bill has stated the bill would establish necessary water supply targets to capture and produce enough water for all uses in the state by modernizing the California Water Plan for a 21st century climate. It's intended to build upon the governor's water supply strategy, supported by CMUA, Aqua, Water Replenishment District, the Southern California Water Coalition, and a number of other water agencies, as well as industry and business stakeholders. It was also presented as a bill of interest this month at Metropolitan's Legislation and Communications Committee. It's opposed by a handful of NGOs who would like to see more focus on demand management measures instead of relying more heavily on water supply targets. They also called into question the need for the financing plan, which was subsequently amended out of the bill. West Basin has long supported efforts to boost water supply reliability through the construction of local and regional infrastructure, as well as through minimizing demand made possible by conservation and water use efficiency. This bill, as amended, would establish water supply targets for 2040, but would also allow for continued focus on demand management measures that could reduce the need for some of those additional supplies. For these reasons, staff believes West Basin should join the coalition of supporters on this bill and ask this committee to recommend the full board adopt a support position on SB 366. It previously passed the Senate Natural Resources and Water Committee and was subsequently referred to Senate Appropriations, where it is now sitting on the suspense file as a bill with fiscal impact. It will be heard later this week on May 18th. That concludes my report on SB 366. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Matt. Director Deere, any questions?
No, thank you. I think we should support the recommendation.
All right. Director Williams, any questions?
No, thank you.
All right. Any other director on line or there? All right. Well, we will move it forward with the staff recommendation. Thank you very much, Matt. The next item.
Yes, Madam Chair, the next item that we have is item 5C. It's Assembly Bill 735 by Assemblymember Berman. This is related to the workforce development and utility careers. And again, for this presentation, we do have Matt Bay.
EJ, I'm now on page 33 of the agenda packet. And Assembly Bill 735 was introduced by Assemblymember Mark Berman, who represents a portion of the Bay Area. This bill relates to workforce development, specifically with regard to utility careers. It would establish the High Road Utility Careers Program to promote utility careers and to connect younger generations who may be interested in following passive utility careers with existing and new resources that allow them to explore opportunities and to find success in this career field. Program would be overseen by the California Workforce Development Board and would partner with public schools, including high schools, technical colleges, community colleges, universities, and other continuing education institutions to promote the pursuit of careers in the utility sector. As we all know, the water industry is being challenged with increased retirements, workforce shortages, and the need to identify and bring in skilled and capable employees. I won't go through the many ways in which this legislation seeks to accomplish its goals, but its objective is to connect workers to new workforce opportunities that provide them with those rewarding career paths in critically needed fields that serve the public and allow for a healthy economy. Workforce development is obviously a high priority for the board of directors, which has sought out partnerships with local education and career training organizations to highlight the benefits and potential for careers in the water industry. Our staff has also played a role in promoting workforce development in a number of ways, including through our internship program, through career panels and career day workshops, and through the promotion of various industry recognition events such as Water Professionals Appreciation Week and Engineers Week. AB 735 is supported by ACWA, CMUA, California Special Districts Association, SoCal Edison, and a number of other cities and water agencies. There is no registered opposition. This is really kind of a feel-good bill. It's not been amended since its date of introduction. It's already passed the Assembly Labor and Employment Committee, and since it is a bill with potential fiscal impact, it was referred to the Assembly Appropriations Committee, where it's also now on the suspense file to see if it can move over to the Senate. The objectives of this bill align very well and closely with the workforce development goals of West Basin's board and staff. As the water industry moves forward, skilled and capable employees will continue to be needed to carry out the important work of water agencies and the public utilities. For all these reasons, staff urges this committee to recommend the full board adopt a support position on AB 735. And that concludes my report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Director Deere, do you have questions?
No, thank you.
Director Williams?
A comment.
Yes.
This is about 80 years late. Thank you.
You're just 80 years early, that's all.
No. Late. Should have done this 80 years ago.
I move that the committee pass on with the recommendation.
Was that your comment, only comment, Director Williams?
About time.
Okay, and
In
I
favor of it.
Director supporting it. I do want to make just a couple of comments. I had met with Mr. Caldwell earlier regarding the agenda items to go over the legislation. And one of the questions I have right now is outreach is very important. It's great this bill is happening, and I agree with Harold. It should have happened a long time ago, but it's happening now. But I'm always interested in making sure the outreach for any kind of effort to diversify the workforce is that it happens those areas where it has not traditionally happened. So that's my comment relative to that. I don't know how that is addressed in the bill, but I would like staff to kind of look into that and make sure that the outreach for these efforts, these goals, and what it hopes to accomplish is really done in those communities that have not been able to know about those opportunities. The other thing is that I saw Senator Bradford over the weekend at an event I went to, and he was there, and I mentioned the Berman bill to him and asked him to consider co-sponsoring it or whatever, but and I think Matt just said that it had passed out of the Assembly and now it's in the Senate. So Senator Bradford, I'm sure we'll look into it. His staffer was there too, and I mentioned it to her. So those are my comments that I certainly support it, so we can move it forward with the staff support. All right, so with that, can we move to the next item?
Yes, Madam Chair, the next item is 5D. It's Senate Bill 867 by Senator Allen and Assembly Bill 1567 by Assemblymember Garcia. And these two bills are related to the 2024 water bond proposals. And for this presentation, again, we have Matt Vey.
Okay, so I'm now on page 47 of the agenda packet. As EJ mentioned, the California legislature is currently considering a number of different bond proposals that contain various water-related provisions. They're having somewhat of a difficult budget process right now, and so they kind of identified early on that there might be a need and an appetite for bonds next year. So the most recent major water bond passed by voters, Proposition 1, occurred in 2014 and had a price tag of about $7.5 billion. In 2018, Prop 68 was a smaller bond measure that had about $1.2 billion in funding for some water-related programs. However, most of the funding from both of these bonds has now been committed and or spent. So with the state budget currently on shaky ground, it's less likely that water projects will be funded through the budget this year, which makes a water bond a better alternative for prioritizing funds for water resources programs. So two of the proposals that currently appear to be the best contenders to make an election ballot next year, and it could be either in the kind of the primary election in March, or it could be in the general election in November. Those are Senate Bill 867, authored by Ben Allen, who represents a part of our service area, and Assembly Bill 1567, authored by Eduardo Garcia, who represents the Coachella Valley region. AB 1567 is also co-authored by Josh Lowenthal, who represents part of our service area that I believe is in Director Williams's boundaries. Currently written, both bonds propose major funding amounts that exceed most, if not all, previous water bonds that have come before them. I also want to note that is often the case with bond measures, there's a Senate and Assembly version, as you see here, and as they proceed through the legislature, very likely that eventually they'll be combined into one version that gets passed and sent to voters. Also, because these propose new statewide bond measures, it requires a 2/3 vote of the legislature to make it out instead of just majority. With that said, SB 867 proposes $15.5 billion in funding, while AB 1567 would provide slightly less at $15.1 billion. While there's differences between the bills, each would provide funding for one or more of the following areas: drought, flood, water recycling, groundwater storage, recharge, and banking, water conservation, wildfire prevention, coastal and ocean resiliency, clean energy, climate resiliency, extreme heat mitigation, which is something kind of new they've started talking about, parks and outdoor spaces, and agricultural resiliency. The board memo provides more detailed information about what each bond would fund, but I wanted to highlight some of the priority areas for West Basin, which would also more generally apply to the water industry as a whole. SB 867 provides $550 million for water recycling and multi-benefit stormwater projects, while AB 1567 provides slightly less at $500 million. 867 provides $100 million for urban and ag conservation, whereas there's no funding for conservation at this time included in AB 1567. And then SB 867 provides $800 million for various groundwater programs, while AB 1567 provides $350 million for SGMA and other multi-benefit type projects. West Basin staff has been working with its Sacramento team, as well as Aqua, water reuse, and others to call for additional funding in the areas of water recycling, groundwater, and conservation. Earlier this year, Aqua submitted funding recommendations to the legislature on behalf of its membership. The full list can be found on page 132 of the agenda packet. Among its recommendations, Aqua is asking for $750 million for water recycling and reuse, $250 million for brackish and ocean water desalination projects, $1 billion for various groundwater provisions, $800 million for conveyance projects, and $500 million for urban and ag water conservation. In March, West Basin board members and staff met with Tina Andolina, Senior Policy Advisor for Senator Allen, during which time we discussed the bond proposal and our priorities for any measure that moves forward. Neither bond currently contains the level of funding that we would like to see, So we will continue to work with our partners and elected representatives to seek larger funding amounts for our priority areas. For this reason, staff is asking this committee to recommend that the full board adopt a support and seek amendments position, which will allow us to continue working with the authors of the bills, continue working with our coalition partners to further revise the bond measures in order to provide our industry with the critical funding that's needed to advance these types of water projects that benefit the state. Both bills are in the appropriations committees of their respective houses, and they will both be heard later this week on May 18th. So as I conclude my remarks, I just want to reiterate that staff is requesting the committee recommend this to the full board with a support and seek amendments position. And that concludes my report on these two bills. Please let me know if you have any questions.
I thank you, Matt. Director Deere,
No questions, thank you.
Director Williams.
No, thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Matt. The fact that you're recommending support with amendments, I think is very good. Director Deere, what would you like to do?
I would agree with the recommendation. I move the recommendation.
And so do I, so we will move it forward. All right, then. Thank you, Matt. The next item on the agenda, please.
Yes, Madam Chair, that concludes our action calendar for today, but we do have two information items. The first is item 6A, and that's our monthly legislative update. This is covering April of 2023. And for this presentation, we have Matt Bay.
Thank you, Jay. I will start with the state legislative update. And this update begins on page 134 of the agenda packet. I also want to note that the Neomela Pappas Associates report begins on page 136, and then an updated bill report can be found on page 139. It's been a busy couple of weeks in the state capitol, and this week is expected to be no different. Last Friday, May 12th, was the last day for policy committees to meet prior to June 5th. And then we have another deadline coming up this Friday when fiscal committees must hear and report bills that were introduced in their house to the floor of their respective houses. A number of bills on West Basin's priority bill list will be heard this week. In addition, the governor released his May revised budget last Friday. It proposes to close a $32 billion deficit while protecting investments in healthcare, education, housing, public safety, and climate action. It also proposes to continue maintaining at $37 billion in budgetary reserves. Due to the precarious nature of next year's budget, the governor also proposed a $1.1 billion climate resilience bond that would increase and sustain investments needed in climate initiatives. Included in the bond would be $270 million for water recycling initiatives. Based on the improvement to statewide water conditions, the budget also proposes to shift $125 million for drought relief measures over to flood control measures. The legislature has until June 15th to adopt a final version of the fiscal year 23-24 budget. As I mentioned earlier, this week a number of bills are headed to the appropriations suspense files in both the Senate and Assembly. Those hearings will take place on May 18th. Bills that get held on the suspense file are essentially dead for the remainder of this session. However, this legislative year, however, it could come back for the second year of the session. Those bills that make it out will go over to the second house. So for instance, any bills that were introduced in the Senate will go over to the Assembly. There are more details in the report, but DWR is also deploying pumps and siphons throughout the San Joaquin Valley to divert snow runoff into groundwater recharge areas. They're hoping to capture up to 55,000 acre-feet of runoff flows that could be stored to prevent excessive floodwaters from harming some of the communities in the valley. In other news, a poll on the topic of the Delta Conveyance Project was recently conducted at the request of a group called Californians for Water Security. The poll was conducted in February, and its results show that 76% of voters support the Delta Conveyance Project as a means of modernizing the state water project's water infrastructure system. A draft EIR for the Delta Conveyance Project is currently being reviewed by DWR, which plans to issue a final EIR later this year. One other bit of news that came out late last month when California's current Lieutenant Governor, Eleni Kounalakis, launched her 2026 campaign for California governor. It's pretty early. She's the first candidate to publicly make an announcement about the position, and if elected, she would be the first female governor of California. I will now move on to some of the other priority legislation, excluding the bills that you heard about earlier this meeting. So I reported last month on Assembly Bill
Matt.
1570. Yes,
Matt, can I interrupt you a minute? Who conducted the
please.
poll regarding the Delta Conveyance project? Who conducted
was,
that poll again?
a group called FM3 was the actual firm that conducted the poll, and they did it on behalf of Californians for Water Security.
Okay, all right, thank you. And can you just highlight those bills that you're gonna speak about, since we already kind of talked about them, please?
Right. Yes, I'll just talk about some of the other ones.
Okay, thank you.
So AB 1572, this is a bill by Assembly Member Friedman on the issue of non-functional turf. It was amended last month and also passed out of Water Parks and Wildlife. It's currently on the appropriations suspense file and will be heard this week. The bill is estimated to cost the state more than $1.5 million over 5 years, which could make it less likely that it will pass this year's suspense file. We'll continue to track that. Another bill is AB 1216 by Assemblymember Al Murasucci relating to wastewater treatment plants and monitoring of air pollutants. This bill would require very large wastewater treatment plants such as Hyperion to install and maintain a fence line monitoring system to monitor air quality levels. It's supported by the city of El Segundo and opposed by the California Association of Sanitation Agencies. It's passed both Assembly Natural Resources and Appropriations, and it's now on the Assembly floor. Another bill of interest is AB 1648 by Assemblymember Baines. This relates to Colorado River conservation. This bill would prohibit the Metropolitan Water District and the city of LA from achieving a reduction in or conservation of Colorado River water consumption through increased deliveries or imports from other regions of California. It was opposed by Metropolitan and it did not pass out of its policy committee, so it's now dead for the year. SB 659 is another bill of interest that staff could bring to the board for a position next month. It's authored by Senator Ashby and would require DWR to develop a groundwater recharge action plan that would allow for the creation of additional recharge capacity of 10 million acre feet by 2035. Staff is currently communicating with the Water Replenishment District to see if a support position on this bill might be warranted. And SB 676 by Senator Ben Allen is another bill of interest. It would prohibit a city or county from enacting an ordinance or regulation that prohibits the installation of drought-tolerant landscaping using live plant material. It would also specify that drought-tolerant landscaping does not include artificial turf, which would then allow cities and counties to prohibit the installation of artificial turf. This is a bill that staff could take to the board for position next month, as it does line up with West Basin's grass replacement and grass replacement plus programs. Senator Allen's staff also reached out to our acting general manager about possibly supporting the bill. It previously passed Senate Government and Finance Committee and is now on the Senate floor. And I'll just go ahead and say that the full bill report can be found on page 139 of the agenda packet. And that concludes my state legislative update. And I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you very much, Matt. Director Deere,
No questions, thank you.
Director Williams,
No, thank you.
all right. All right, thank you, Matt. Thank you for that comprehensive report. What's the next item on the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, the last item we have for you today is item 6B. It's our monthly Metropolitan Water District program update. And for this presentation, we have Tammy Hurley High, our water policy and resources analyst. Oh, Madam Chair, I think we skipped over the federal affairs update. My apologies.
Okay. We can do that.
Yes, I'll hand it back over to Matt.
Thank you, Jay. I'll be quick with this one. I'm now on page 160 of the agenda packet. I'll just start by saying that West Basin had a successful federal trip to Washington DC last month. And as you can see in the VSA report, we attended 12 meetings over the course of the trip, meeting with each legislative office in our delegation. We also met with the U.S. Bureau of Rec and the Army Corps staff, as well as metropolitans and Aqua's federal representatives. President Houston was also able to deliver the Legislator of the Year awards to 6 of our congressional members during our meetings. Overall, the meetings went very well, and I can say that President Houston did a great job of going through the briefing book with each of our offices to talk about our priorities, to talk about our support for Pure Water SoCal, and to educate them on the future of our regional reliability programs. While there was no specific request for funding or legislation this year, I think President Houston did a nice job of setting up what would be future requests for funding once West Basin is ready to move forward with its own programs and projects. I also wanted to note that the West Basin Contingency had a very productive meeting with the Army Corps staff, where we talked about our Harbor South Bay project and our funding authorization. The Army Corps also expressed an interest in having a group of their Los Angeles district staff, including Colonel Julie Bolton, who's the commander of the Los Angeles district, to take a tour of the Edward C. Little water recycling facility and to further discuss the future of West Basin's Harbor South Bay project. So staff is currently working with the Los Angeles district to find some dates that would work for the group to have the tour, which we will then, of course, share with the board for coordinating your attendance or participation. Let's see. Then, as reported last month, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation announced a draft supplemental environmental impact statement for the Colorado River with 2 primary alternatives for how to achieve the government's requested cuts of 2 to 4 million acre feet. One option is to prioritize water reductions based on senior water rights, while the other would implement an even distribution of cuts on the lower basin states. Public comment is currently open for a couple more weeks until May 30th, with the final version expected to be adopted and released this summer. And that concludes my federal affairs report. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions of anyone? Okay. All right, EJ, could we move on?
Yes. And once again, I'll hand it off to Tammy Hurley-Hawk for the monthly Metropolitan Water District program update.
Okay, thank you, EJ. Good afternoon, directors. So this report, as you know, is intended to provide a brief update on activities that are relevant to West Basin and our customer agency. And this report starts on page 166 of the committee packet. There's a few items that were considered last month at Metropolitan. One, the climate action plan. Last month, they released their first annual climate action plan report, and that details the greenhouse gas reductions through green power purchases, energy efficiency measures, and turf replacement. In this report, there's a link included that provides more information and a copy of the report. This involves a set of strategies in order to reduce its greenhouse gas emission and to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045. Next is Assembly Bill 1572 by Friedman, potable water, non-functional turf. So last month, the Metropolitan Board authorized a support position on this bill if amended, and they authorized the general manager to co-sponsor if the amendments are made. This is intended to represent the best interest of the member agency. This bill would prohibit the use of potable water for irrigation of non-functional turf that are located in the commercial, industrial, municipal, and multifamily residential property. Sponsors include NRDC and Heal the Bay. And as you know, this item was presented at the caucus meeting that West Basin had in April. And so over the past several weeks, Metropolitan has been involved, and they have been working with the member agencies in reviewing the language of this bill in detail. And they've been very involved in seeking proposed amendments. And the next item is the policy principles for modernization of water rights and administration in California. So Metropolitan had adopted a set of policy principles for modernization of water rights. These principles are intended to protect water supply investments, enhance enforcement, and protect supply reliability. The development of these policy principles is a result of several pieces of legislation that have been introduced this year that would make significant changes to the state rights and the administrative authority. And they could have significant impacts on Metropolitan's access to supply. There's a total of 9 policy principles, and they are summarized and outlined in this memo. So the next item is the Colorado River operations. So as you just heard last month, the Bureau of Reclamation released the draft supplemental environmental impact statement. And the purpose for this is to supplement the 2007 interim guideline to modify for operation of Glen Canyon Dam and Hoover Dam to address the historic drought, low reservoirs, and low runoff conditions in the Colorado River Basin. Reclamation has identified the need for modifying the operating guideline due to the potential of the continued low runoff conditions that could lead Lake Powell and Lake Mead declining to critically low elevation. That action would modify the interim guideline and would impact operations through December 2026. The draft SEIS considers 2 action alternatives and a no action alternative. So included in this report is a description of the 2 alternatives. And alternative considered in the analysis focuses on the water levels at Lake Powell at the expense of Lake Mead and includes significant supply cuts that would hurt the Metropolitan Water District and its partners across the basin. Metropolitan is in conversation with the basin states and the federal government and their partners to pursue protection for the lakes and the river while also minimizing negative impacts. That comment deadline to the draft is on May 30th. And Reclamation is holding public meeting to provide information and receive public comments. And of course, yeah, Metropolitan will be providing a comment on that. And the record of decision is expected to be released this summer, 2023. Which are the main updates? And then also included in this report is a list of the board meeting actions on the attachment. And then the last attachment is a water supply update. So we've included the chart that we've been doing the past few months. So yeah, I'll just highlight a few key areas here. So for the State Water Project, the Northern Sierra Peak snowpack was 199% of the April 1st average. And the Southern Sierra is very high with the peak snowpack at 319% average. On May 1st, DWR conducted their 5th annual snow survey of the season, and those results reported 59 inches of snow depth and recorded a snow water equivalent of 30 inches, which is 241% of average. You know, DWR has allocated 100% of the requested supplies from the State Water Project for Metropolitan and all the other state water contractors. And for the Colorado Basin area on the right side of the page showed Lake Powell to be at 23% capacity, Lake Mead at 29% capacity, and the elevation is 1,047 feet. And the middle area on the gray shaded boxes, it shows information for Metropolitan storage area. And Metropolitan no longer has a supply demand gap, so they are still working to putting water into their storage areas. And then lastly, on the second page, the left side green shaded area for the State Water Project, the snowpack peaked on April 8th. It has since started to decline due to the spring snow melt. The Lake Oroville Reservoir storage chart is currently at more than 3,000 million acre feet. It has 1.3 million acre feet more supply compared to last year. And Lake Oroville is at 87% of total capacity. The 8th station precipitation index is recording 61 inches and is 128% of normal. For comparison purposes, this year is tracking similar results as compared to 2018-19 water year. And this, for the precipitation, this showed very high levels at 129% of normal. For the Colorado River watershed, Lake Powell's unregulated inflow is forecasted to be 149% of normal. And the Colorado River snowpack is showing 165% of normal, which peaked just a few weeks ago in the middle of April. So that pretty much concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Oh,
Madam Chair, that completes our information calendar.
all right. Any questions, please? Okay. Closed session, no closed session, correct?
Correct?
Director's comments, Director Deere.
Just Matt and Tammy did a great job as usual. Appreciate it.
All right. Yes. Director Williams.
Ditto.
All right. My comments, thank you to staff. I echo Director Deere's comments. Great job, and thank you for all the reports this morning. So with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.